And welcome to another edition of our adult Sunday school class, where we are going through the Bible timeline and are in Exodus chapter 19. We are in the year 1446 BC. Screen share go on here. And let's do this. Here we are. Very happy to have Sister Minnie online with us as well. Hey. So the new nation, people of Israel, have exodus out of Egypt, come across the Sinai Peninsula in 18 days, and by day 20, have crossed to the other side of the Exodus Sea, the Yam Suf, and then made their way through Midian, the familiar territory of Moses, come around the backside to the Mount Sinai in the region of Horeb, where Moses had been with the burning bush, just as he had been coming to that area regularly, bringing his flocks. So in Exodus 19, let's pick up, start our slideshow. Let's go down to, so in Exodus 14, this block in red here is where we are at on this timeline, going from the bottom to the top. We've had the 12th dynasty with Joseph and his pharaoh, Amenemhat III, who had the dreams, followed by the 13th dynasty, during which Joseph died and Moses was born, and the harsh treatment began and all of that, leading us to the Exodus here with the pharaoh of the Exodus, Dudamos II. And after the devastation of Egypt with the Exodus, we have had foreigners come in. And so while we're here in this middle Bronze Age to be, China's being led by Huairen of the Shang dynasty, but here in Egypt, the 13th dynasty in orange here is now being led by Pharaoh Ibi something Matre. His name gets corrupted. We don't have the full name here. So he's of their 13th dynasty during this low period, the second intermediate period after the high point of the Middle Kingdom, and before we get to the New Kingdom later on with King Tut and Ramses the Great and all that. That's all down the road. So this 13th dynasty of the native Egyptians, after the devastation of the Exodus events, they've been invaded and pushed down to the south by these outsiders coming in here in this green here. These outsiders include the Amalekites that the Israelites fought while they were on their way out of Egypt. The Amalekites, joining others, were on their way into Egypt. And they actually take over in the north, push the locals down south. So these foreigners in the north become a dynasty of their own, the 14th dynasty. These are referred to as the early Hyksos, or outside foreigner shepherd kings. And so we've got Nubu Seri Ya'amu is the first one of those foreign Hyksos. So Egypt's got two dynasties happening right now. Foreigners in the north, like that guy, and then they've got the natives down in the south. So here we are at Mount Sinai, where we'll be picking up in Exodus 19. So over in the Bible lands, Babylon's being led by King Amidatana, great-grandson of Hammurabi. The Lord's people here at Mount Sinai in the line of Christ, the tribe of Judah. We have Aminadab, I'm guessing about 98 years old, and his son Nahshon, about 39 years old. Nahshon is the 28th generation of Adam and is the leader of the tribe of Judah, through which Christ will come. So here they are, the red line showing their travel route, and here they are at the base of Mount Sinai while Moses has gone up here. And let's see, we are getting some info from this gentleman here, Joel Richardson, who was in the films Patterns of Evidence, Journey to Mount Sinai Part 2, and looking at some of his take on some of these things. But let's pick up Exodus 19. Now that God and Moses have had their initial conversation, let's pick up in verse, let's go ahead and read again, verse 3 down. We'll go a little further than we've gone before. Exodus 19:3, Moses went, let's go back here, back to Mount Sinai here, right there, yeah. Exodus 19:3, Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now then, If you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So I spent the last couple of weeks going over that and other scriptures related to that. Let's continue down to new territory, verse 7. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded them. Then all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. And they all lived happily ever after, right? Not exactly, but we'll get there. But looking to what Joel Richardson presents on this event and this coming together of the people. And we're looking at this with the view of marriage covenant with God and his people, just as the church, as we are the betrothed fiance, the bride, making ourselves ready for the groom to come and claim us and take us home. So too, as Joel Richardson's bringing out in his book, this is a desire of God from the beginning that was consistent throughout. He has been the pursuer. He has been the wooer. He has been the one desiring and calling his people to come be his bride, and that he would be a husband to them and be this have this relationship with him after their deliverance from the Passover, which is why, as we talked last week, it's so important to understand the difference, just as the difference between salvation and baptism and being in the church body, the difference between the Passover and then the baptism through the Exodus Sea, and then the covenant that's happening here, this marriage covenant. In fact, he said in verse 5, if you'll indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then ye shall be. Well, at salvation, at Passover, there's no if and there's no covenant. God provides, and there it is. You have the covering of the blood of the Lamb. Death passes over you. You've been delivered. You've been saved from death. So now we're talking about an agreement. There's no agreement at salvation and in Passover. The agreement, the marriage agreement, is the covenant that's happening here. So God's presented to Moses the initial, if you guys will, what was verse 5 again? Obey my voice and keep my covenant, then yes, you shall be my people. So too today in the church, our vow through baptism is we want to be the people of God. We already have the testimony of salvation, the Passover that we experienced. And so now we want to be the people of God. We want to obey him. We want to keep his covenant. We want to be the people that he claims for his own. And so he says again, 5, if you'll indeed obey my voice, keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And these are the words you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses went down in verses 7 through 8 and said, here's what God says. And the people and the elders all said, hooray, yes, we want this. Absolutely. So here's what Joel Richardson has to say on that. The offer was not only accepted by the representative elders, but all of the people enthusiastically said yes to the proposal. Again, seeing this in marriage terms. And now he brings out a very important point. The difference between our familiarity with engagements versus biblical and cultural here, betrothals. And this will actually get to what we had looked at with Joseph and Mary and some questions we had and thoughts on that whole thing. So here's the point he makes. Engagement, however, is merely a verbal agreement to eventually get married. It is not a legally binding matter. No one can sue anyone for breaking off an engagement. You can get mad and blast them on social media, but that's about it. Betrothal, on the other hand, is actually a legally binding condition in which the couple is viewed as being married. The distinction, however, is that the betrothed couple has not yet consummated the marriage and does not live together. Nevertheless, throughout this period, infidelity is considered to be adultery. So even though you haven't been with your spouse yet, if you're with someone else after you're betrothed, you've been unfaithful. That is adultery. So that's how serious betrothal is. It's not engagement like we think of it. So just that right there. Well, let me add this. Genesis 19:14, men betrothed to Lot's daughters are described as his sons-in-law, even though they're just betrothed. And talking about Joseph and Mary in Matthew 1, verses 18 to 20, because Mary was found to be pregnant during the betrothal period, she was exposed both to the charges of adultery and the potentiality, the deadly penalty, if she had been found guilty. So the question, I believe it was Brother Clay who asked, great question. So at what point in the account here did Joseph and Mary actually get married? Because we read about them being betrothed. Well, the answer is their betrothal was the marriage. It's like a two-part thing, the betrothal and then the consummation of it. It's like, okay, I buy a house, escrow closed, so the house is mine, but I haven't moved into it yet. So with betrothal, escrow is closed. You are bound. You just haven't moved in yet. And so they were married basically at the betrothal. They just hadn't acted on it yet. So reactions, thoughts, comments, questions there. Does that help for our understanding?
And it probably doesn't make it look any different, but it did, we saw the, like we read about the wedding ceremony.
Yes.
They had and the traditions and the Jesus involvement. And
Yeah.
But then you never hear if they ever had a formal, a ceremony or whatever. I mean, but they consummated it, so that made them married.
Yeah, so actually, great question. Brother Clay makes the observation that in the accounts of the Gospels, we don't have the record of the marriage ceremony, the event. And the reason why is because at the time we're reading the Gospels, it's already happened. That was for them, the betrothal is the wedding ceremony. There is no engagement and then a wedding ceremony. No, for them, the betrothal is the wedding ceremony. And after that, it's just the formality, the finalizing of moving in together and combining everything. So that's why we don't read about a marriage ceremony after they are what we would think of as engaged. They go down for the census in Bethlehem. And then, at what point do they actually tie the knot? The knot was already tied at their betrothal. There is no wedding it's contrary to our way of doing things. But the way it was done here for our understanding is the betrothal is the ceremony, and that's what we're going to see here at Mount Sinai. And then the coming together is just the acting on what's already taken place, the ceremony and the binding and the bonding together. So that helped clarify for us? Cool. All right. So again, he points this out. So how is betrothal distinct from marriage? We've talked about how it's distinct from engagement in our world and society. How is betrothal distinct from marriage? In the simplest terms, betrothal is the first phase of the marriage covenant. The second phase is the consummation of the marriage, moving in together, combining all property, sharing the same bed. Within the pages of the Bible, this distinction between betrothal and marriage is seen when Jacob demanded of his father-in-law Laban, "Give me my wife, for my time is completed that I may go into her." Genesis 29:21. Although they had not yet consummated the marriage, Jacob already referred to Rachel as his wife. So there's another example of this consistency in the scriptural culture here. So the betrothal is happening here. God on Mount Sinai is making the offer, and then the people are saying, yes, we accept that. So now this is going to be what's happening as we come together. So let's take a look at what happens with this coming together. Let's read on verses 9 through 15. Exodus 19, verse 9. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also trust in you forever." Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. The Lord also said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and have them wash their garments, and have them ready for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. But you shall set boundaries for the people all around, saying, beware that you do not go up on the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall certainly be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot through, whether animal or person. the violator shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. He also said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. So we'll pause right there. So just reading those verses, any reactions, any questions, any fuzziness or confusion on what just happened here, which of course we're going to talk about. So what did just happen here? Moses brought word back to the Lord. God said, okay, now here's the next step. If we're going to go forward, since we're moving forward, here's how we move forward. Y'all go take a bath and get ready. And on the third day, we'll come and meet and we'll go from there. And by the way, keep the mountain holy. Any trespassers are going to be killed, but don't touch them with your own hands. Throw stones at them or shoot them with an arrow. But so keep yourself pure. Get ready for these next 3 days after this whole bathing thing. Keep in mind, we're talking, as we've been discussing throughout, 2.5 million people. That's a big bath. Obviously, I don't think they all took it right at the same time in the same place, but so you get the idea here. That's maybe another reason for it to take 3 days. And so for all the people to wash themselves, number one, there has to be the water there, which we've looked at through the film, which there was. And there has to be all these people focusing on this. Getting 2.5 million people to get ready for one thing, that's logistics, that's coordination, that's a lot of wrangling. And so this was a very huge, momentous, big deal for this to be happening here. So here's what Joel Richardson talks about. What's actually happening here is, again, part of the wedding betrothal ceremony. It's the step that's called the mikvah. We've actually heard that word in The Chosen when they would go down into the water. And so the mikvah, this was a ritual washing or cleansing that the bride would undergo before the wedding ceremony. Another essential element of any Jewish wedding ceremony is the ketubah. The ketubah is a legally binding contract that contains the obligations of both parties. It is read aloud and signed during the wedding ceremony, or as we would understand it, the betrothal ceremony. That's when that happens. Another essential and conspicuous element, conspicuous, we hear the word inconspicuous, it means you're keeping on the down low. Well, conspicuous is the opposite of that. It's there and open for everyone to see. So another essential and conspicuous element of any biblical or Jewish wedding is the huppah. We've seen that in The Chosen as well. It's the archway that is built that the husband and wife, groom and bride, fiance stand under. And so we've seen this being built as well. A huppah is in its most basic form, simply means a canopy or chamber. In Jewish weddings, the huppah is the ever conspicuous, again, plain seen, structure that the bride and groom stand under or inside as they read and sign the ketubah. Finally, there's a visible sign. In modern times, this is most often the wedding ring. As we will see at Mount Sinai, there was another visible sign that was given. In fact, all of these important elements of the biblical wedding are found at the Sinai covenant. The first component of the biblical betrothal wedding ceremony is the mikvah. Before the ceremony could begin, Yahweh commanded the people to wash and consecrate themselves for the ceremony, as we saw. So it's falling right in line with that. Okay, so if the people washing is them doing the mikvah part, where's the huppah? Where's this canopy? Well, here's Joel Richardson quoting Gordon Wenham, like the tabernacle, whose construction is ordered in Exodus 25-30, Mount Sinai is divided into 3 zones. The summit, right up here, corresponds to the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies, to which only Moses could go meet the Lord. Then he quotes someone else, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchak, also called Rashi, says, when they came to present themselves at the foot of the mountain, he came forth to meet them as the groom comes forth to welcome a bride. Okay, so we've got the Holy of Holies here, we've got the inner sanctum. Up here is where the elders will later meet with Moses in chapter 24, meet with God. the elders and Moses, but only Moses goes all the way up. So the people are down here. So let's talk about this covering and this huppah. To do that, we're going to have to read on and see what the Lord actually does with this. Because right now, we don't have one. Right now, we just have the people. They've now washed and bathed and gotten themselves ready. They're at verse 17. He brought the people out of the camp to meet God. Excuse me, verse 14. Moses went down from the mountain, verse 14, to the people, consecrated the people. They washed their garments. He said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. So let's read on now. Verse 16. So it came about on the third day, when it was morning, that there were thunder and lightning flashes and a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet sound. So that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. And they stood at the foot of the mountain. So just looking right here on the satellite, you've got 2.5 million people at the base here, at the base of this mountain, ready to meet God. So it happens. Verse 18. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain quaked violently. So the people are assembled down here. The Lord in his glory comes down, and there's the fire associated with this. So let's pause here. Keep your place there in Exodus 19. But we can see a parallel with this in Revelation chapter 11. And we're going to see very much, including when we get back to Revelation on Wednesday nights, that as we've already seen, that the end times are going to be a final exodus, a greater fulfillment of the Exodus. The Exodus wasn't just coming out of Egypt, it was coming into a place of fellowship with God. So too, the end times are going to be the same thing. There's going to be another exodus out of the ways of this world and a being delivered into the kingdom of God, starting with Jesus ruling and reigning from Jerusalem for the 1,000-year millennium and us with him. But here in Revelation chapter 11, again, talking about the parallels with the Exodus account here. Revelation 11, verse 19 says this. And the temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple. And there were flashes of lightning and sounds of peals of thunder and an earthquake and a great hailstorm. So the coming together of God with his people is going to be accompanied by the same events, the same descriptions. It's going to have to be a similar experience. Reactions, questions, all good there? Well, let's continue in the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. We'll pick up in verse 18. And what the Hebrew writer says to the New Testament church folks here in the book of Hebrews, especially this passage here, is reminding them actually of the difference of what was temporarily established at Mount Sinai, but what is permanently being established with us as Judeo-Christians in the New Testament church age, and what we are coming to. Pick up Hebrews 12:18. For you have not come to a mountain that can be touched, and to a blazing fire, and to darkness and gloom and whirlwind, and to the blast of a trumpet, and to the sound of words, which sound was such that those who heard begged that no further word be spoken to them. For they could not cope with the command, if even an animal touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I am terrified and trembling. Hebrews 12, verse 22, but you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood, which speaks better than the blood of Abel. Pause right there. So, and we'll continue on to the end of the chapter, but just right there, the writer of Hebrews is telling the New Testament church members of their assemblies that what you've been brought to is different than what was happening there. There are similarities and the common themes, but where that was temporary with the law of Moses, what you have now is going to be eternal. And you have not come to a physical mountain. You've come to something spiritual. Again, theme today is going to be the spiritual beyond the physical. And you are in verse 23, the assembly and church of the firstborn enrolled in heaven. You've come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect. Well, how are we righteous? How are we made perfect or made complete or made whole? It's, of course, by the sacrifice of Christ and his grace and mercy upon us as we've received that and entered into that. In fact, he says in verse 24, you have come to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant. Remember, a covenant is an agreement. It is not salvation. So new covenant, that phrase new covenant, the new covenant is not being saved from hell. Salvation from hell was available in the Old Testament days. The new covenant is the church age that Christ established in his blood. He purchased the church with his blood. And we as New Testament church members, we're not entering into the law of Moses like Mount Sinai. We are entering into the new covenant bought with Christ's blood. He is the mediator of the new covenant. To sprinkle blood which speaks better than the blood of Abel. So just that right there. Does that make sense? Or does anyone have any reactions or thoughts or questions, any fuzziness on this passage from Hebrews from chapter 12, verse 12 to 24, or 18 to 24 there? Does that fit? Does that make sense? Does that kind of click? All good? Silence is approval? Yeah. Let's continue on with verse 25 then, to the end of the chapter. See to it that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if those did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape who turn away from him who warns us from heaven. And his voice shook the earth then. But now he has promised, saying, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heaven. This expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of the things which can be shaken, as of created things, so that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let's show gratitude, by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. So what do you think this Hebrew writer is talking about there with all of that? That whole acceptable service thing and all of that. Let's take a look at it. So he says, don't refuse the one who is speaking. If all these things happened with earthly stuff back in the day and people didn't escape, how much more are folks not going to escape when God is declaring from the heavens? And there's going to be one more shaking, yes, referring to the end times that we're aiming towards. And he says, verse 27 is important. This expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of the things which can be shaken, as of created things, so that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Now, the things of the earth, the things of the world, are they real? Is this real? Yeah. It's real. As real as all this is, it is also temporary. It can be shaken, so it can be removed. In fact, when the time comes, it all will be. And that's the point the Hebrew writer is making to the church people here. He's saying, understand the difference between the physical and the spiritual here. This is really important, especially about this kingdom. He says, and again in verse 27, this expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of the things which can be shaken, as of created things, physical things, so that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. If a natural event, disaster event happens and this church building is swept away and this church building is no more, is the church no more? Of course not, because this, as we all know, this building is not the church. We are the church, and that will again be in the message this morning. So the Hebrew writer is telling them physical things are not going to last, but the spiritual will. So that is where we place ourselves. don't place ourselves in a physical focus. We deal with the physical, we have to deal with the physical, and we are called to be good stewards of the physical, but don't expend our focus and energy and live in the physical. Be a spiritual being who is dealing with the physical. And just there's kind of a big difference in mindset and heart set and attitude and understanding and approach. So that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. This is the stuff that Jesus and others talk about in the separating of the wheat from the chaff. What is that? That's when you're at the threshing floor. What's the whole point of a threshing floor? Well, it's part of the harvesting process where you take the wheat grains, and I'm no expert, but you shake them or you take a winnowing fork and throw them up in the air so the chaff gets separated and blown away and you're left with the valuable wheat. So the chaff is the fluff and the wheat is the stuff. So there's a separating out of the fluff from the stuff. God knows the difference. So he's expecting his people to know the difference. What in our lives that we're dealing with, what is the fluff and what is the stuff? What is lasting and what can you count on that's stable, that's going to be here, and what can be and will be removed. This is also in this was in chapter 1 of 1 Peter, last week's message, the purifying of metals like gold. What happens? You heat them up, and what happens is the impurities bubble up to the top. Those impurities are called the dross. What do? You shave off the top, the dross, and the impurities, and you're left with the pure gold. And as Peter makes the point, even gold has a melting point if you go high enough. So even gold is not fully going to last. But the point is there's the separating of the wheat from the chaff, of the dross from the purity. And so what all this is about here is recognizing for ourselves what is of the dross, what is of the chaff, and where the wheat is, where the pure gold, spiritually speaking, really is, and being placed in that. And so does that all help make sense with all that?
It's not a comfortable analogy.
Yeah, it's like
Think of being heated up or tested or whatever, or
yeah,
being shaken. I mean,
and that's why Peter talks about fires right after the fire of Rome happened.
yeah.
And we're talking about that after we're having these California fires. And
when we went to the sequoias and we were walking around reading the little informational
yeah,
things, and in order for those trees to propagate, they have to go through a fire. It was really kind of weird. They drop their seeds or whatever they do, and then the fires naturally come through, and then a new little tree sprouts or something. I mean, there was some sort of a process.
yeah,
Some sort of a process with that, and you could see burn marks on those trees,
mhm.
It was, so fire is destructive, but in some cases it's also necessary,
Mhm.
and it brings forth new life in a sense, or a new period,
A word the ladies like is exfoliating.
Well, my God.
Amen.
Well, exactly,
We
yeah,
step in and,
exactly.
prevent it.
But we
Yeah.
don't like to think about being separated or having to go through a process to be, yeah, what it
Yeah.
takes to get to that purity or to get to the other side. I mean, nature does it,
Right.
but we don't like to think of it in terms of what we have to go through, How many times when we're going through something, do we always tell ourselves, or do our friends tell us, you'll get to the other side, you'll come out on the other side, you'll be better for it, you'll be,
Mhm.
well, but going through it certainly stinks. Sorry. I'm not-
No, you're absolutely right.
Downer,
No, this is important.
But it's tough.
Yeah.
It really is. It's tough, but it shapes us, right?
But gave us a memory that's very it's like we use the reference, about childbirth. Oh, how, it was so painful, this, that, and the other, and then boom, we want to do it again. And again, I mean, it's like, you don't remember.
Oh, I
that part of it. But you know what I'm saying?
It's not enough to stop you.
Yeah, no, so it's a point.
And the Bible talks about that very thing.
Yeah, going through it. Oh, I mean, my own personal, nowhere near that, but you remember I was having trouble with my tendons, my
Oh,
feet,
yeah.
and I could barely walk and everything, and I mean, it's gone.
Amen.
Okay, and the sciatic gone, but you forget. I mean, what you went through, so like you do it happens again, maybe, or whatever, but the heart attack, so
Mhm.
all that stuff,
Right on. This was actually brought out in the film and for the movie night. When the congressman was visiting the pastor and he held up the pine cone.
Yeah, that's what we saw.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he said, the pine cone is covered in sap. The seeds are inside. They're trapped. What happens? And he throws the pine cone into the fireplace. The fire melts off the sap so the seeds can then come forth. And so a natural God-designed process, scientific, accurate, and all that stuff that God set up that way. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. But the analogy, the natural example for us spiritually is the same thing. While the fire of purifying is not always a fun process. But we're told in scriptures when we go through these things. James talks about when you go through these trials, when you go through these experiences, these even fiery ordeals, as they're described in some other passages. Where is our focus? Do we look at it and think, oh my God, we're about to have a Silkwood experience? Or do we look at it and say, God is with me, as he says in Isaiah in the 40s, God is with me through the fire. He is with me through the floods. And just like he was, and I didn't think about this last week, talking about this, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he was right there with them there. Talk about our theme from 1 Peter 1 was fireproof faith. Fireproof faith. And a great example, they had that. They were fireproof because of their faith. And Christ being the one their faith was placed in, who saw them through. And even if they died, it still wouldn't be the fire that had the last say, because they were eternal and the fire is temporary. And so the spiritual always has the final say, while the physical has to go through these fires of purifying, these fires of even just process on earth. The end result, if we stay with it, if the fire doesn't chase us away, if we know where our hope is placed during the times of fire, if we know where our security, our foundation, our rock, that Jesus Christ, the rock that is laid down, the cornerstone, upon the rock I'll build my church. We talk about in the devotional not only the duration of the church, but let's also talk about the duration of his word. The Bible has been persecuted. His people have been persecuted. The nation of Israel, as well as the church, has been persecuted. And they're in the midst of a persecution, as Peter is writing, after the fires that destroyed 2/3 of Rome. So while all these things are going on and happening, God is still faithful. His word has not been able to be destroyed. His people of Israel have not been able to be destroyed. All the nations that tried came and went. They're still here. His church is still here. Those who've gone after the church, a lot of them are gone, but we're still here. And so God is faithful and true. So as we face fires, which it's not the fire that we go, oh, hey, yay, isn't this great? It's the fact that, okay, God is with me. He is not going to leave me or forsake me. This fire will come and go. And when all is said and done, I will actually come out better for it. So there's my hope. There's my joy. There's my confidence. There's my assurance. And that's what I'm going to focus on to get me through these fires that are temporary. Doesn't seem like it's temporary at the moment. Well, praise God, the exact feeling of the heart attack or the other things you're going through, is not fresh. At the time it was happening, sometimes it's like, when I stub my toe, it's like I have no idea what's going on with the rest of my body because everything's focused on that stupid stub toe. So in the moment, that's all we see. But that's why spiritual maturity is pausing the moment, the snapshot, zooming out to see the spiritual picture behind. And that, remember, a snapshot is a freeze frame. It's still. Life, spirit, you are not still. You are not a freeze frame. The moment may seem like it. We may feel stuck in the moment, but we're not. We are in motion. We are in moving. There's a before, during, and after. And so it's very important for us, for our own preservation, for our own awareness, for our own spiritual health, to not get hung up. Recognize the spiritual, the snapshots of the moment. Don't be oblivious to them, deal with them, address them, but recognize there's a bigger picture, a flip book that's unfolding, and this is in motion. This will pass. Where will we be when it passes? And that's what the Hebrew writer is telling the church members he's writing to about the unshakable kingdom. About just as there are the fires of Mount Sinai, there are going to be fires we go through, like Peter is telling the church members who are being persecuted after the Roman fire. Yeah, the fire of persecution, like the fire that burned through Rome, these things are going to happen, but they won't last. They will burn out. They will be temporary. Where will we be found when it happens? And what are we going to do now to make sure we're where we want to be when it's all said and done? And so he says in verse 28, therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let's show gratitude. And we'll pause right there. So knowing we have the promises of God that we can rely on, that he is with us, he is holding our hand, he is carrying us through, that is a promise we can confidently rest in. Isn't that a relief? It doesn't mean that we won't have some bumps and bruises along the way, but that is to be such a source of relief for us that we are so grateful for that. Since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let's show gratitude. How? By which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe. That's why we serve here, because God is faithful and we have each chosen, we want to be planted with our faithful God. We want to be with him. We're so grateful for what he has done, is doing, and will be doing in our lives, that this is where we want to be found. Out of that gratitude and love for him, recognizing his great love and care for us, there's nowhere else we would rather be. When Jesus said some hard things in John 6 and many walked away, Jesus looked to the 12 and said, will you also leave? Peter said, where else could we go? He didn't say that because he didn't have options. He said that because he knew what the options were and they didn't compare. He said, you have the words of eternal life. You have the words that are going to see us through to the other side of all these things we're dealing with Rome and all that stuff. And he said, we have believed and have come to know. One of my favorite phrases in scripture, come to know, which means it doesn't happen in an instant. Through our life of relationship with God, we come to know things. We come to know him more. I know Sister Ashley more than I knew her 25 years ago when we got married. Guess what? I'm not done learning. And this is why we explore these different things, because in talking about faith and knowledge, they're not a threat to each other. We'll kind of wind down with these thoughts here. If I say, well, I don't need to know Sister Ashley anymore because I already love her and as she is, and that's good enough. I don't need to know anything more about her. That's not a lot of love, is it, when you really think about it? True love is, hey, I want to spend more time. I want to know her more. Well, it's no different with the Lord. Okay, he's already saved me. I love him. Hooray, Jesus. Well, if we really love him, we want to know him more. God said, I made creation and it functions and it works. Well, let's look at that. Let's check out how these seeds and pine cones work in natural fires and all these things, and how it glorifies God in his provision and protection and all that stuff. Let's explore how God did these things. Okay, God said he met with the people on Mount Sinai. Wow, here it is. Satellite imagery. That's awesome. Let's check these things out. Let's get to know God more and rejoice in the faith we already have and see his faithfulness in these glorious details that inspire us to love him even more than we already do. As he is making these things known to us, he is the kind of husband and provider that he wants to say, here's all I'm doing for you. Here's all I'm providing for you. Here it is. Come and see, taste and see that the Lord is good. He is not up on his throne demanding us bow down to him out of fear and quaking in our boots, not knowing anything about him. Quite the opposite. He is coming to us and saying, here I am. I am with you. Let's be together. Let's do this together. Let me show you how much I love you. Let's enter into this agreement together. So that's a good stopping place for this morning. Any other reactions or observations or questions on these things we have considered so far? All good? All righty, we'll stop our screen share for now and stop recording. and we'll get ready to go before the Lord in song.